Amina had always felt a deep sense of safety in the village where she lived. Surrounded by towering green hills and the sweet fragrance of pine, it was a place where she could forget the pressures of the outside world. Her father, Kofi, was a humble driver for the Lua family, one of the wealthiest families in the region. Kofi had a quiet dignity about him that made him respected by everyone who knew him, and Amina was proud to be his daughter. He had raised her to believe in fairness and the importance of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. The Lua family, though powerful and rich, never seemed to treat Kofi with arrogance. They paid him well, and in return, Kofi did his work faithfully, taking the Lua family to the farthest corners of the land with pride. But it was a relationship of convenience, one that never threatened their positions in society. Or so it seemed. It was an evening like any other, when Amina's life changed forever. She had gone to the market, as was her routine, to pick up some groceries. The sun was setting, painting the sky with warm hues of orange and pink. She carried her basket along the dirt road, humming softly to herself, her thoughts drifting to her father's warm greeting when she returned home. But as she passed the old oak tree on the edge of the village road, she noticed 3 men standing there, blocking her path. Jabari, Tariq, and Nashit, the 3 sons of the Lua family. The brothers had always carried an air of superiority with them. Jabari, the eldest, had a smirk that never seemed to fade. Tariq had eyes that could pierce through you, calculating and cold, and Nashit, the youngest, always seemed to be the silent enforcer of whatever ideas Jabari and Tariq and Nashit dreamed up. The brothers were known for their arrogance, for thinking themselves untouchable, above the laws that governed the rest of the village. As Amina came closer, Jabari stepped forward with that same smirk, his voice smooth like velvet. "Where are you going, Amina?" His words were light, but there was an edge to them, a warning that she couldn't ignore. Amina hesitated for a moment, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm just heading home," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But she couldn't show fear. She had learned from her father that showing fear only gave people power over you. But Jabari wasn't listening. His eyes flickered with something darker. "Not tonight," he said sharply. Before Amina could step around him, Tariq reached out, grabbing her arm with a strength that made her stomach twist. His grip was firm, unyielding, and cold. "You're going to come with us," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Amina tried to pull away, but the brothers were too strong. Panic gripped her chest as they started dragging her off the main road into the darkness. She could hear their laughter behind her, a sound that once seemed innocent, but now felt like the harbinger of doom. Her body tensed, but her mind screamed for help. Yet there was no one to hear her. The village was empty, the air thick with a growing sense of dread. As they moved further from the village, the sounds of nature, the chirping of crickets, and the rustle of leaves seemed to fade, leaving only the oppressive silence of her own heartbeat. Amina felt small, invisible, just another victim of their arrogance. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let me go. My father will—" But the words caught in her throat as Nashit, who had been silent until then, pushed her into a nearby thicket. What followed was a nightmare Amina would never forget. The brothers' sense of entitlement and power came crashing down on her as they took turns abusing her, laughing at her helplessness. She tried to fight back, but the fear that gripped her was paralyzing. Her mind screamed for an escape, but the world around her felt like it had caved in. This wasn't just an assault, it was a message. No one was above the Lua family. And they left her in the thicket, broken and bleeding, their laughter fading into the night as they walked away without a second glance. In their eyes, she was just another casualty of their power, a nobody who had no right to resist. The pain in Amina's body was excruciating, but it was the silence that hurt the most. There was no one to help her, no one to hear her cries. She was alone. As Amina lay there, her body trembling and her thoughts fragmented, something inside her began to stir. The tears flowed freely, but they weren't just tears of sorrow. They were tears of something deeper, something powerful. The shame, the fear, the anger, they all melted into a single thought. She would not be silent. No longer would she be just a victim. She would find a way to make them pay. The brothers had underestimated her. They thought they could break her, but in that moment, something awakened within her, a resolve that would never fade. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. Weeks passed, and Amina's life was forever changed. Her body healed, but the scars, both visible and invisible, remained. The world around her seemed unchanged, but she knew something deep within her had shifted. The village, once a place of safety, now felt like a prison. The faces that had once been familiar and kind now felt like masks, hiding a world of secrets. Kofi, her father, noticed the change in her too. He could no longer ignore the distance growing between them, the weight in her eyes whenever she looked at him. Amina tried to move on, to live as if the nightmare hadn't happened, but it was impossible. Every night, she dreamed of the brothers. Every day, she felt their presence, even when they weren't around. The shame they had forced upon her clung to her like a shadow, and the whispers of what had happened spread across the village, tearing apart her sense of identity. But Amina refused to let that shame define her. One afternoon, as she sat by the window of their modest home, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky, a thought struck her like lightning. She realized that the only way to reclaim her life was to fight back, not with her fists, but with her mind. Revenge wasn't about causing more pain. It was about exposing the truth, making sure that they could never escape the consequences of their actions. And that was where she would start. With the Lulu family's downfall, the thought of doing nothing, of letting them get away with what they had done to her, was unbearable. She had seen the power of their wealth, how they manipulated the law, and how they made everyone afraid to speak up. But what if there was a way to turn their strength against them? Amina knew she was just one person, but even the smallest spark could ignite a revolution. Amina began to carefully observe the Lua family, studying their every move, learning their routines, and keeping track of their activities. Her mind, once clouded by fear and trauma, became sharp, focused. She began to understand the intricacies of the Lua family's wealth and the network they had built over decades. She learned about their corrupt practices, how they manipulated business deals, avoided taxes, and silenced anyone who dared speak against them. And she realized the truth. The Lua family wasn't invincible. They were vulnerable, just like everyone else. Her father Kofi had always taught her that the truth could never be buried forever, no matter how deep the hole. Amina began to gather information, carefully and quietly, using her position in the village as a trusted source of information. People spoke to her not because they thought she was someone special, but because they had no idea what she had endured. They didn't realize that the girl they had known as innocent and sweet was now becoming something far more dangerous, a woman with purpose. One evening, as she walked through the market, she overheard a conversation between two of the Lua family's business partners. The conversation was casual at first, about investments and profits, but then it shifted to something far darker. They spoke of shady deals, illegal land acquisitions, and untraceable transactions that could destroy entire communities. Amina's heart raced. This was it. This was the key to exposing them. The more she listened, the more she understood the magnitude of their crimes. The Lua family wasn't just guilty of abusing her. They had been exploiting everyone, from the poorest workers to the powerful elites they had once claimed to be allies with. Jabari, Tariq, and Nasheed were not just arrogant, spoiled sons. They were criminals, manipulators who had controlled everything with their wealth and influence. Amina had a choice to make. She could walk away, bury her pain, and let the brothers continue their reign of terror. Or she could fight back, not with violence, but with the power of truth and justice. The decision was simple. She began planning, The pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Amina reached out to several people she knew who had been wronged by the Lua family, former employees, business partners, and even a few people in the government who were tired of the corruption. She built a network of people who had all suffered in silence, each one connected to the family in different ways. They were united by a common goal: to bring down the Lua family. For the first time since that fateful night, Amina felt a spark of hope. The pieces were falling into place. The road to justice wouldn't be easy, it would be dangerous, but it was the only way. The Lua family had taken everything from her, but Amina would make sure they would never take anyone else again. As the days turned into weeks, Amina's resolve grew stronger. She had a plan, and with each passing day, it became clearer. She knew that the truth was more powerful than anything the Lua family could offer. With her network of allies, they would expose the family's corrupt dealings, their lies, and the very foundations of their wealth. They would make sure that everyone knew who the Lua family truly was. But Amina knew that exposing them wouldn't be enough. She needed to destroy their empire, make them face the consequences of their actions, not just in the eyes of the law, but in the eyes of the world. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. And with that in mind, Amina made a vow. The Lua family would fall, and she would be the one to bring them down. As Amina continued to work in the shadows, the village slowly began to change. Whispers of her investigation spread among the people, though no one dared speak her name aloud. It was a risk. But the walls that had once contained the secrets of the Lua family were starting to crack. More and more people came to her. People who had witnessed the injustice firsthand. And even those who had once worked for the Lua family. Amina listened to their stories, each one adding a new piece to the puzzle. But Amina knew that to bring down the Lua family, she had to do more than just expose them. The Lawflicks were powerful. Their influence reached far beyond the village, and they had built a web of protection through corrupt officials, bribed lawyers, and high-powered business connections. Jabari, Tariq, and Nashat didn't just control the economy, they controlled the very systems meant to protect the people. Amina wasn't naive. She knew that exposing the family's crimes wasn't enough. They would fight back, just as they always had. So, she sought help from those who had suffered the most, the voiceless, the ones who had been crushed beneath the weight of the Lua family's cruelty. Her first ally came from an unexpected place. Yara, a former maid in the Lua household, who had witnessed countless injustices, but had never spoken out. Yara had been afraid, terrified of the repercussions that would follow any attempt to expose the family. But Amina's strength gave her courage. Together, they began compiling evidence, secretly recording conversations, collecting documents, and interviewing former employees. As the days went by, Amina's network grew. She reached out to Emeka, a former business partner who had been swindled by the Lua family. He had lost everything to their fraudulent schemes and was determined to see them pay. Emeka had contacts in the media and legal circles, and though he was hesitant at first, he soon understood the magnitude of what they were doing. With Emeka's help, Amina was able to secure more information. Evidence of illegal land acquisitions, tax evasion, and even bribery of high-ranking government officials. The deeper they dug, the darker the family's secrets became. One evening, as Amina and Yara sat in her modest kitchen poring over documents, Amina's phone rang. It was Emeka. "They've caught wind of us," Emeka's voice was strained. "They know someone's been talking, and they're starting to close in. You need to be careful, Amina." Amina's heart skipped a beat, but she steadied herself. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She wasn't afraid. She had come too far to back down now.